Good day. At the current moment, there is no way for us to sign up and sign in users. To be able to do this, we need to create a database to store the user details. We will use a database engine called MySQL, which is freely available. We will create a new database, we will call is Project Manager. Inside it we will create a table to store the user details. Let's create the users table. It will have two columns, the email address and the password. We will make the table have a primary key which will also auto-increment. You can search the internet on databases and what they do, that is beyond our scope for now. We have added the email address column, let's add the password column also. The new database has been created and the table, now it's time to use this in our application. We will work with the login screen and its layout. We need to open the layout and add a data source to the page. Let's add a data source to the login layout. We will create connection parameters to it so that it communicates with the database. We give it the database type, the database name, the username and password. This is followed by the table will be access, the field names, the primary field name. The record source is used to link the data source to our form. You will recall we used dot notation when we were specifying the V models for the email address and password. This is the link. The fields specify which fields to read from the table. We set the auto-increment field to be -1 in the data source. It is the only field that is an integer data type in the table. We will sort our user details to extract by email address. We give the data source control a friendly name. We generate members for it and later bind it to our component page. We will use the create and select where events for it. Create is to add a user to the database, whilst select where will read the existence of the user. Now in our code the abstract data source has been created. We need to bind it and then code our app to use it. You will recall that we specified a record source of user on the data source. If we open the user details layout, you will remember that the dot notation for the V model starts with the user object. So this automatically binds whatever is entered to the data source via the V model dot notation specification. The sign up button for our form then needs to get the user details entered and process these. As we do not need duplicate users, we have to check whether the email address exists first, and if it does not exist, sign up the user. We will use the code we used before to validate the form, get the details and then process these accordingly. It is important to never store real passwords in a database. So we will use the MD5 hash algorithm for our passwords. We get the entered user details, and then we will use both the email address and password to generate a hash password. After we read these, we generate the hash using a JavaScript library. Instead of storing the real password for the user in the database, we will store their email address and hash. This provides a layer of protection. The next step is then communicate with the database and find if the email address entered exists. We will do this with the data source. This needs to execute a select where clause, using the email address entered, and after it executes, give us the result back. We specify the database table field to search, the operator to use and the value to look for. Let's also add some loader code that will indicate a process is taking place. The select where clause will return a result and also a success value. We can log these. Let's finish the database communication by adding code to actually fire the select email address. When we click the register button, the entered user details will be read, a select where clause to the database will be executed and the result will be trapped by the select where callback. Let's run our app to attempt to register a user. We enter an email address, followed by a password and click the register button. This then communicates with the database to find the email address. From the console log we can see the MD5 hash and find out that the database did not find the email address, as the array length is 0.